Hello and welcome to episode 194 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I am one of the co-founders here at ETR. I am your bronzed tennis Adonis. And today, I am joined by one of the truest, oldest friends of the show. This is a young man I met 17 years ago at a place called the Sports Network. He's covered European soccer. He's covered the Eagles. He's covered the Sixers. He's covered the Giants. He's been in a brouhaha with Eric Flowers. He knows every golf course in every NFL city. He's worked for Metro. He's worked for Comcast. He's worked for NJ.com. He's made his way to the worldwide leader. It is, of course, ESPN.
Used to be your tennis partner.
Yep. Before I got into all these tennis bets, I used to hit with him all the time. It is ESPN's Jordan Raanan. Jordan, how's it going, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me, Adam. Yeah, long time. And we go way back. There's lots of memories in there in that 17 years for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you've ever beaten me in tennis. Unfortunately, I haven't had as much success going forward against actually capable tennis players. But
let's be fair. I had never played tennis in my life, in any sort of like competitive, like even like going and playing like multiple sets against somebody until I started hitting with you.
Yeah.
So
another excuse. Okay. On today's show,
what happened when we played one-on-one basketball?
Yeah, one-on-one's not my game. It's really not.
I mean, I believe this was like, probably about 17 years ago. I just took you down to the post all day because you're a little diminutive, let's say, and just scored at will.
Yeah, one-on-one's not my game. You're right. I liken myself to a smaller Steve Blake. Anyways, on today's show, we're going to cover a bunch of things. We're going to get some background on Jordan and what it's like to be a beat reporter in today's NFL. We're going to get into exactly how information flows from the source, the reporter, to us as fantasy players. We'll get to some specific New York Giants stuff for the upcoming season that I think is interesting because they're certainly an interesting team. And then we'll take some listener questions from all you sick pups out there. Before we get into all that, I want to remind everyone that the bundle package is live, combines the draft kit and in-season for the lowest price we will have all year for a limited time. That is up. Second, if you have the draft kit or the bundle already, be sure you're taking advantage of the underdog credit. You can find instructions on how to claim that credit at the top of Silva's top 150. Okay. So people often ask, I'm sure they ask you, Jordan, too. People often ask how I got into all this as a quote unquote career. And obviously I use that term very, very loosely. The truth is I took a job at a place called the Sports Network right out of Penn State in like 2004. They were paying me like 24 grand a year, and Jordan fired me after 4 months. I mean, it was so sick. I was there for 4 months. They were barely even paying me. I mean, it was like a rounding error. and then Jordan fired me after 4 months. He's a twisted individual. Jordan, what do you have to say for yourself about our time at the Sports Network?
I clearly did not fire you. I would have I was what, 24 years old, clearly not making hiring or firing decisions, making not enough to live on my own, basically. That was definitely not my doing, but I did help get you hired, bring you to Philadelphia, start your life. So I'll take credit for that, but I will not take credit for the firing.
Yeah. They actually said I
rehired you. I basically brought you to Metro.
Well, right. I'm going to get into that in a second here. They said I was quote unquote laid off, which is really just a fancy word for being fired. But anyway, so then what happened was there was a startup called Metro Newspapers, which was a free daily in Philadelphia, like kind of designed for commuters. I used to joke with my friends that it's like what the homeless people use for sheets and blankets and firewood and stuff like that. But anyways,
but it's not completely inaccurate. There's truth to that.
Of course. But it was a really young staff. Jordan got the job somehow as the sports editor. And basically, like, he could do whatever he wanted, which meant we could do whatever we wanted. Jordan said you can cover the Sixers. I mean, I had zero beat writing experience. I didn't cover girls field hockey. I was like, oh, let's go cover the Sixers. And when I say I was a disaster, I was just an absolute total disaster, just a stone, whereas Jordan covered the Eagles and actually did a good job. I was a disaster. I also
No, I was a disaster too. I was learning on the job. I made some mistakes that I cringe at now. Kidding me?
Yeah, of course. But anyways, I also wrote this absurd gambling lifestyle column under the pseudonym Johnny McCash, which was completely ridiculous. And then I also wrote a fantasy column once a week just about like strategy for season long. And that's how everything started to snowball to Roto. Anyways, my point
You
here.
you skipped a part.
Yeah.
I got you a job. You kind of took my spot taking scores at the Doylestown Intelligencer.
Yeah, I wasn't even taking scores. I was like the agate clerk. If anybody's in the newspaper game,
yeah, but that's what an agate clerk is.
I never answered the phone.
Weren't you taking them on the phone?
Nope.
Oh, I took them on the phone.
No, they knew I couldn't.
And somebody's got to tell you the track results. I mean, talk about mundane jobs right there.
Right. They knew I couldn't interact with any other humans, so they didn't let me answer the phones. I took
Sorry, you can't answer the phones. That's too big a responsibility.
Yeah, you're right. That was part-time.
$7 an hour or something.
Yeah, those were low times too. It was also Friday and Saturday night. Those were low times for sure.
All the way out in Doylestown when we were living in Philly, that was just like an hour away almost.
Those are low times. But anyways, my point in saying all this is I know beat writing seems simple. It seems easy from the outside. I'm here to tell you that it's not. Jordan, how bad was I, and how did you end up getting good at it? People were going to want to know, how did you go from covering the Eagles for a blanket newspaper to covering the Giants for ESPN.com?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think you were that bad at all. I think you had an idea of what people wanted to hear. And that's like really the basis of being a good beat writer, like getting the information that people want. And you were able to kind of relate to guys. Now, granted, everything is a learning process and it takes time. You got to learn how to maneuver around a locker room. But the longer you're in there, and I'm sure it was the same for you and it's the same for me, you learn like how to talk to guys, when to talk to guys, who you can relate to. That they make a joke on the Giants beat, a lot of the guys. And there's a lot of truth to this. Like, I'm friendly with all the bad dudes somehow because I'm a bad person. So then it's like, I'm able to relate to people like me. So like the good guy, like the good guys in the locker room, the people who are considered like, more on the religious side. Like I don't relate to them that much. That's just not what I'm all about. So, you're able to, and I think you're like that too. So you were able to relate to people. You were able to figure out which guys you can actually relate to. Now I joke about the whole being a bad person kind of a little bit, but it is true. Like, I'm able to talk to guys in the locker room that I can relate to more. The guys I can't relate to at all, like, there's just no idle conversation. And without the idle conversation, you can't create trust. So that's what I learned along the way. First of all, you learn how to get information, which is the most important part. And then you have to learn how to deliver it and what you can kind of present and how to present it. Now, Reuben Frank was a guy, and you know him in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. He was a guy that kind of helped me along the way. I mean, I was so green. And when I was covering the Eagles at first, like, I had no idea how the game worked. The game being the beat writing game and the information, dispersal game, like of getting information and sending it out and getting it out. And guys like Reuben Frank was one of the first guys. He really like took me under his wing and helped me out. I remember watching the great, legendary, and you'll understand this. And not a lot of people will understand. Phil Jasner. Yeah. Was awesome at his job. And I remember watching him, the way he worked. And that's really how you do it. And you learn from mistakes. So I worked my way up, built my way up, did the same route you did, worked at the sports network, an information gathering site, basically, was a wire service, learned how to write there, then went to the Doylestown Intelligencer, where like I said, I took scores like track and gymnastics on the phone, which was god awful. I mean, talk about wanting to blow your brains out some nights, sitting there taking swimming scores. There's like 50,000 events in high school swimming. And then, one of the guys there recommended me to someone at the Metro, working hard at the Metro, getting over, getting in at Comcast, doing stuff at Comcast, getting hired by NJ.com, getting hired by NJ.com on a part-time basis, and then getting hired to cover, moving over, getting covered to cover the Giants. and then from the Giants at NJ.com, working and getting hired at ESPN. And it's all about connections. This is I always tell people this. It's a people's business.
Yeah. And that's why I had to be out. Exactly. That's 100%.
You got canceled.
Yeah. No.
When you found out it's a people's business, you were out.
Well, no, look, I mean, the truth is that I do think that I know a lot about sports and what people want to read and stats. That's not even close to the most important thing. The most important thing of being a beat writer by a mile is relationships and like interacting with other humans and like schmoozing them and ass kissing and stuff like that. I can't do it. I can't. And like, I don't know, man. Like, but to me, like, it's infinitely more important than knowing what you're talking about or being a good writer, just like knowing people and schmoozing them. So, I mean, 100%, that is the thing. Like, anybody can just go to a press conference and gather what they say and write a good article, you know, but what people want to hear about, I think what sets you apart and other good beat writers apart is, can you get information that A, most people won't tell anybody else, or B, like, you're not even supposed to know. So like, how do you even get people to tell you that information? Like, I never got anybody to tell me anything that they weren't supposed to tell me.
Well, you have to earn that trust from the individual, right? And so if you have a relationship with an individual, they're willing to tell you things knowing that you're not going to screw them, right? That's the whole thing. Everybody's worried about getting screwed over. So you have to create a relationship where there's enough trust, where people are willing to tell you something, and then you're going to present it in what they think is a fair and equitable way and not screw them over. Now, have I screwed people over? Unintentionally, I have along the way. And it happens. Like sometimes, like Justin Pugh, great guy, okay? And he was doing a press conference once, and he was saying how, really, I hate the Eagles. But the phrase he used was, I hate, because he worked, you know, they're the enemy. He grew up in Philadelphia. He was an Eagles fan, but he was with the Giants. And the quote that he used was, I hate Philly. So when my editor splashed that as the headline, when really he was saying, I hate the Eagles because I play for the Giants, all his friends are like texting him and calling him, be like, you know, what the hell are you doing? Like, you hate Philly, you traitor, you know, POS, like, and he's getting killed. And he like texted me basically, and he's like, never talking to you again. Right. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was driving home. I didn't even know that was the headline.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I got home and I looked at it. I was like, yo, you got to change this. It was too late. He's like, and I said to him, I said, look, sorry, there's nothing I could do. The editor put up, the whole story was about how he didn't like the Eagles.
Yeah.
But the quote was, I hate Philly. And so he was like, sorry, man, you have to take the brunt of it. It's your fault. And basically he didn't talk to me for like a year or two.
Well, I think players and readers both don't, a lot of people don't even realize that writers don't actually write the headlines. I mean, writers have no control over what the headline is, or at least little control over what the headline is on a story, right?
Yeah, no, that is true. And so you always naturally say it's the editor's fault, which a good editor always tell you. If you get into these problems with your relationships, blame the editor. They're willing to take the blame, right? They're the behind the scenes guys. Always blame the editor. Rule number one of beat writing, blame the editor to maintain those relationships.
So I think one thing that you can see though, and we're not going to name names here, but there's some reporters out there in the NFL that's very transparent that they're like mouthpieces for the teams or mouthpieces for a certain agent. So like, you know, you can get a long way in this business, I would think, by just, you know, carrying the water for teams. Whatever X general manager wants you to put out there, you put out there. Whatever X coach wants you to put out there, you put out there. So then you have a good relationship with them, but you're also a mouthpiece. So how do you do the balance between being this shill mouthpiece for someone and also having a good relationship?
Yeah, I always like to tell guys, like, look, you know, it's a two-way street. Kind of, you have my back, and you know, and I'll do my best. But I'm going to be honest about, you know, like if you play poorly, I'm going to say you played poorly. Like, but I'm going to be honest about it, and I'm going to look in your eye, and I'm going to be the one who asks you questions. I'm not going to be the one who stands in the back and then knifes you. Never ask you a question because they're scared to ask something negative or something. Even like guys know when they play like crap, right? Like they know it. Like you know. So I'll say, you know, if I ask them about their struggles, because look, there's a lot of guys out there that will never ask the negative question. They're scared. But then they'll take the quotes that other people ask the questions, and they'll write, and they'll knife you from behind in a second. So I try to make that clear to guys. Like, look, my job is to sit here and disseminate information and tell and people tell me stuff all the time. I don't report everything people tell me. I report a small fraction of what people tell me, because my job is to sit here and decide, okay, what is the truth? I'm not just going to sit there and be somebody's mouthpiece. Like, my job is to sit here and parse the information and decide what I think is true, because I know when people are feeding me BS. Now, sometimes I'm wrong. A couple times I probably put out something where I know I was being used. I didn't notice it until afterwards. Like, that happens. But I try, and I have a pretty good radar. I think this is one of my best skills that makes me that has helped me get to where I am in my career. Is my first impression is usually right. I can tell when someone is BSing me or a bad person or completely full of crap.
Yeah. Okay. One thing I didn't like is, and this has been kind of coming to a head lately, is it feels so antagonistic between the media and the players. Like, I really felt like, and I was only there for a little bit, but I really felt like 95% of the players, if they had their choice, would never talk to the media. Like, they really hate the whole thing. They hate the whole thing. And honestly, like, I don't blame them in some sense. Like you said, like, they can talk for 30 minutes and they make one little joke or one little controversial or offhand comment. It turns into some big headline that makes them look really bad, you know? So I don't even blame them for being pissed off at the media a lot of times. But, like, I can't imagine going to work every day and my job is to talk to these guys who don't want to talk to me. Like, literally, I just have no interest whatsoever in talking to me. So how do you overcome that? And do you feel, is there anything we can do to make the relationship between media and players better? Or is this just how it is and some beat reporters are better than others that have relationships with players?
Yeah, my approach is I try to talk to them on a personal level, you know, and know that, look, and I always try to, and it's important to me that we're human. Like, we're just doing our job. And the idea is we are there for a reason. I always tell guys this. I always say this, we always have to remember, this is an entertainment business. Okay. Our job is to kind of keep the conversation flowing publicly in a broad sense so that your sport, you know, gets talked about. So your sport is popular and keeps growing and getting bigger. Like, and then that leads to you then making more money, the sport being more popular. And I think that's the thing that needs to be conveyed to the players. Yes, they can go out on their own platforms. And, you know, that's the thing. Social media now exists. So they have their own platform. Like, what do I need the media for? I can just go out and spew whatever I want. Right. But they're not going to answer the questions most of the time that the general public wants answered. They're going to feed you their own propaganda, which is fine. I mean, there's a purpose for that for sure. But I just try to explain, look, it's an entertainment business. It's like one big cog. We're all just pieces in this cog. And in the end, it helps us all make more money. Like, that's what it's about. It's about the business having more attention, more eyeballs, and being more popular. And in the end, that'll benefit us all. And now, most players don't understand that. They don't get it at all, that whole concept. And they want to have nothing to do with you. They think you're the enemy.
Right.
And it's becoming more and more like that. And I don't know if there's any way back. I mean, because the players are getting more and more power. You know, so I don't know if it's ever going to get better.
Yeah.
I think in a way it might only get worse, but it's really up to the teams. The teams need to explain to the players that this is basically, the media is essentially a marketing tool for the league, right? So they get publicity and attention. And in the end, it benefits everybody, and that they have to do it. Like, a lot of teams don't explain to guys, they have to do this. This is part of the job. This is part of their contract. It's something that they have to do. It's a promotional event, essentially.
They would argue that most of the media that comes out about them is negative, though, and so then they get super tilted about it. You know, it's not promotional; it's negative.
Is that real? Is that realistic?
Oh,
how many people sit there and kiss their ass on social media and tell them how great they are? They love that, right? But then you could write 20 good stories about a guy, and then you write one critical thing, and all of a sudden they get super sensitive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at as sports society, and I don't know, probably more than this country, but at least this country, but probably the world.
Yeah. You mentioned business and money. I'm curious if beat writers, I know you are, but are beat writers aware of how important fantasy is to their job? Like, I know you are and a bunch of other beat reporters are, but I mean, who else besides us fantasy virgins are following every single tweet? Like, I actually have alerts for beat writers set up. Yeah. Like, I don't miss anything. I read all their articles. I'm subscribed to every single newspaper. I try to read every newspaper every morning. Who else is doing that besides me? Do they realize how important fantasy is to the beat writing game? Or maybe you disagree. Maybe you think it's not that important. Maybe you think beat writing is still about the fans. I don't know.
No, you know what? I told somebody with the Giants years ago. I mean, probably like 8 years ago or so. They were like, you're interested in that. It was some kind of fantasy angle part of it. Yeah. And I'm like, look, you understand, like, we all have jobs and we're getting paid what we get paid for two primary reasons: fantasy and gambling.
Yeah.
And at the time, the leagues were still like, we're too good for that. Of course, now they're willing to jump in bed with it like no other, because it's huge money that essentially was out there. And the reason why the NFL was so much more popular than every other sport. So the teams were like, no, it's because everybody loves football. They love the Giants, right? And I was like, okay, whatever. You're living in fantasy world. And you've seen everybody sort of catch up. ESPN, and I can only speak for us, is really big on, like, our group, the NFL Nation group. We do a lot of fantasy specific stuff. You know, like, we answer fantasy specific questions every week. Like, there's a big emphasis put on fantasy. So I think that places do realize how important it is these days. And but the teams are finally catching up. And I think there was a time when they totally just thought, we're the NFL, we're the X team, we're so popular. But those days are gone. I'm curious about fandom moving forward. Like, kids nowadays, everybody used to be super provincial. You were a fan of whatever team, city you lived in, or your parents were, and that was it. Yeah. It's not like that anymore. People are so into fantasy. Their favorite, like, they're Steph Curry fans, so they're Warrior fans, And so in the next generation, like in 20 years, what is fandom even going to look like? I'm really curious to see what that is, because of fantasy and because of gambling, and just because people can watch every game. You used to only be able to watch certain games. Now you can watch, if you want, like Steph Curry, you can watch the Warriors anytime you want.
Yep, exactly. No, it's changed so much, and it's only going to change more. Totally agree. One other thing I had to ask you, are beat writers aware of how much of an impact, like, an off-the-cuff tweet can have? And we know how much impact Twitter has, but, like, let's say a beat writer tweets something on Sunday morning, like, or maybe like Friday during practice, he's like, doesn't look to me like Antonio Gibson is moving quite right. And, like, man, that's super subjective and super speculative, but you could have millions of dollars shipped from Antonio Gibson to someone else because one beat writer tweeted this. Are the guys on the beats aware of this at all?
Look, I really don't think so. Most people are not aware of that. To be honest with you, I really don't. I haven't thought about that much. Now, I've changed my approach, and look, we've had conversations about this before, about Twitter strategy and approach and social media, and I've changed my approach over the years, and I'm really much more selective. But a lot of people are still out there just tweeting whatever comes to their head at any time and just throwing it out there, like 50 tweets a day, there's a lot of beat writers out there. They're still doing that. I'm sure because their stuff comes across your wire and you're like, this person just tweets too much. Like, what? Right. I don't care what this person thinks on every single thing in life.
Yeah.
And I view my social media accounts in a much different way. So I think I understand that a little bit more now. Never thought about it to the degree you are, but I think most beat writers, no way do they realize how impactful that their tweets might be in regard. Like, they're just trying to produce content, good content, and especially, serve the organization they work for. They're looking to do a good job and impress their organization and their bosses. They're not thinking about the impact, about what the information has on people and the money that's out there. They really don't.
Yeah. And like, I generally don't think, and maybe this is insulting to the beat reporter game, I generally don't think that beat reporters are great talent evaluators. I see so many beat reporters tweet like, this guy's going to be great this year, and I don't know how much I buy into that. What I do want to know from beat reporters, though, is, man, who's playing? Like, who is on the depth chart? Like, there is so much interest and value in depth chart reporting. Like, can I just get on Sunday morning? Is this too much to ask, Jordan? On Sunday morning, can I get the running backs or the wide receivers, who's lining up with the first team, who's lining up with the second team in warmups on Sunday? Can you tweet that to me? Or maybe from practice, can you tweet to me who's getting the first team number 3 wide receiver reps? I don't care if you think X player is good or bad. Who do the coaches think is good and bad, and who are they putting on the first team? What's the order on the depth chart? Can I get this information on Sunday morning or even from practice?
Yeah, I've gotten those texts from you before. People would really be interested in like the Giants running back rotation this week, And you're right. Sometimes you don't realize, because your bosses, for the most part, don't care who the number 3 receiver is on the Giants in their 2-12. They're 2-12 at the time. They don't care. You care. Like, people out there care. So it's a very delicate balancing act of what you think people care about and what people actually do care about. And that's really what goes through at least my head. And a lot of times it's like, I'm trying to put out information that I think is relevant. Like, who the backup quarterback or the third string left tackle is not relevant to anybody. Nobody gives a darn about that.
Yeah. But you play fantasy. You know Absolutely. That it's important. You know that it's important who's lining up in the slot this week because X guy is out, It's not what your bosses are asking for. So it's not at the top of the beat writers, conscious. Well,
so there, then it just kind of flies under the radar. You're like, oh, you just seem to know it. You're locked in this zone, right? You're around the team so often that sometimes you forget. And I find myself in this all the time. I have to take a step back and say, what would an outsider or somebody who's not here? Because to me, it's like, oh, this guy's been in this role for 3 straight weeks. He's still in that role. I mean, I see it in practice throughout the week. I already reported it on Monday and Tuesday. But like you said, then Sunday morning, that's what people want to know. It's still like, they don't really know for sure. And you're just like stuck in the zone. The season is like a long slog.
Oh, yeah.
Like, where every year I get to the point where I lose my car in the airport parking lot. Or when I used to go back and forth between Philly and New York when I was covering the Giants, but living in Philly, I would it would get to the point of every season where I would get on the wrong way of the turnpike. And after an exit, I'd be like, oh crap, I'm going the wrong direction. What am I doing? Like, it's a long season. You need people to remind you, or you need to take a step back. So that's why I think a lot of times people miss. This is the information, the basic information that sometimes people want.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've given this out on the podcast before. I'll give it to you as well. $1 billion business idea, a fantasy specific reporter, fantasy only for each team. This fantasy reporter is not there to do features on players' family that we don't care about. He's not there to criticize the coach. He's there to simply find out information on injuries and depth charts. And that's it. One for each team. Charge a ton. I would pay a ton for this. One for each team. And he's out there to ask fantasy depth chart and injury questions. That's it. Nothing else. $1 billion idea. Anyways, just give it out.
Hey, come on. Start the business up, man.
Yeah, I know.
Let's go. Start it up. Get someone on it. We'll get some investors. Get some money.
Yeah, dude. I'm telling you. Okay. I want to get to injury information stuff. Obviously, beat reporters are incredibly important for injuries. How tight to the vest are teams with these player statuses on injuries? When a guy gets listed questionable, how hard is it to get them to tell you whether they're going to play or not? And why would they leak it if they're going to play or not? Like, why not just come out and say it? Like, why leak it to Schefter or you or whoever?
It's an interesting question. Just like you said, it's that relationship. And like, they know, okay, I mean, by Sunday morning, who cares if anybody knows the other team at that point can't go and draw up a game plan based off something they learn on Sunday morning. It's too late already. There's so much that goes into it. People don't understand the nuances that go into football and playing, designing game plans, the amount of work that goes in. I mean, these coaches work hours that I think are stupid. You would definitely think you're stupid. Like, there's no reason for you to work 20 hours a day. Like, there's no way you're being productive all 20 hours. You're wasting a lot of your time, and you're working out 4 hours of sleep. Then you're less productive the next day. You know, like all these coaches. I mean, I said to Joe Judge once, I said, what time are you waking up in the morning? Are you like 5? He's like, 5. I'm like done with my workout by 5 already, you know? Like,
yeah, football guy.
Like, so you're waking up at 4 a.m. I mean, you're going to sleep and getting home at midnight and working and waking up at 4 a.m. every day. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's a crazy business. People, so that's why they're willing to tell you, like, because by that point it's too late. You guys, you know, it's a two-way street. You work together, right? In a way, they're willing to tell you stuff. They know that there's something coming back eventually at some point in return. I mean, not in regards to coverage or whatever it may be, or they just like you and they trust you. Like, that's what it's about. The individual who's usually hurt isn't the one who's often the guy telling the information either. I'll say that it's usually the coach who's willing to, you know, tell you what's going to go down on Sunday, or other players who know, because the players usually know by, like, here's the thing. The players usually know when they meet on Saturday, you know, so they usually meet on Saturday night. They do a walkthrough on Saturday morning, and then they do some sort of meeting on Saturday night, whether it's home or road, either way. And in by that Saturday night meeting, usually even the Saturday morning walkthrough, you know for sure who's basically playing and who isn't, or what everyone's role is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you about why the Schefter bombs come out so late on Saturday night with the injuries, but I think you answered that well there.
I think it's really because coaches in general don't want that information out before Sunday, you know, really Sunday morning. At that point, feels like everyone's just racing each other to get it out. Right.
Exactly. Okay. Last beat report question before we get to the Giants. This whole aggregation model, and honestly, like, I was a huge part of it at Roto-World. We made an entire site of aggregating beat writer takes, and this was before Twitter. I mean, we would read every article and basically aggregate what we thought was important, put on the site. It became extremely popular. We weren't paying the beat reporters or NJ.com or any Washington Post. We weren't paying them anything. We're basically just stealing. I don't want to say stealing, but I guess aggregating is kind of a way of stealing and putting our spin on it.
It sucks.
Yeah. Pro Football Talk turned this into a massive business. I mean, massive business. Now, like, everyone is doing it. Everyone is doing the aggregating of takes business. Is this tilt beat writers? How much do beat writers hate all this? What can beat writers do about it?
I can only talk for me, but it tilts me to no end. Like, big blue banter, you know, IG is like got 50,000 followers, and they just take stuff that you put out half the time and they slap it on their site with a nice looking graphic and the breaking news. Like, I wish this was intellectual property and they couldn't just take it. I wish there was a way to basically say, look, this is mine, even though I'm putting it out in the public realm. Like, you can't just take it and throw it up, even with attribution. But that's the world we live in. And you have to understand, like, it's a crazy ecosystem out there, because you say something and then by the time it's done going through the layers of aggregation, it might say something completely different. And there's nothing you can do to pull it back. It's already out there. And the Joe player seeing it on Instagram or whatever site you want, Twitter, whatever it is. I think more players are on Instagram than Twitter, or use Instagram than Twitter. And it's like, I didn't say that, but it's out there and there's really nothing you could do about it. That drives me bonkers to no end. You know, people don't even read or listen to stuff. They just take it and they take whatever the next person aggregated and then aggregate it on their own. And then they aggregate it and then they aggregate it. And so the fifth layer of aggregation might say something completely different than you said. And you're just like, throw your hands up. You're like, what the heck? I really wish there was a way for me to protect, or not just me, but every individual could protect the information that they're putting out there, you know, that they own it. Now, it's not just public information out there that anybody could take and twist and do whatever they want with, because that's part of the problem. And I don't know if there's a solution to it.
Yeah. No, I know. And I like reading the aggregated sites because I can quickly get through all the NFL news much faster than I could going through and reading everybody's articles and takes and everything like that. But I agree with you. It's a problem when it gets twisted. It's a problem that the writers don't get the proper credit, even if it is attributed.
You really have to click on it and click through sometimes to see if that's really what was.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just like, that's so weird. Did he really say that? And if you
Yeah.
click on it, you realize, well, okay, that's not really what he said. That's a slightly embellished version of what that individual said. So, and you mentioned something before. I wanted to say this. I thought I was smart and at the beginning, and I would give my evaluations and my opinions on a lot of different things. And the more plugged in you get, you're able to do this. And so now I realize I know Jack, right, in regards to evaluation stuff. That's not my job. I'm not putting in the full time of evaluating players. I have people that I trust the most. Like, I get information from and evaluations from all different kinds of people, but there's certain people I trust more than others based on track record. And I try and tell you, like, when I give an evaluation or an opinion, a lot of times, most of the time it's an informed opinion from somebody I trust, because these people actually know what they're talking about. These people actually know what they're doing in regards to the evaluation business.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's what you want. Like, you're like, a lot of times I'm saying, this player is looking really good. I can't tell which offensive lineman is looking good. I'm telling you what one of the coaches in a conversation on the side told me, and I'm giving it to the public saying, hey, this guy's looking good. It's like, hey, watch out for this guy. I'm like trying to say in a nondescript way that's not blaring that it's from somebody, it's from an assistant coach or from like the general manager or from an executive or whatever, or the head coach, whatever it may be, that they really like this guy. And this guy is good. They has a good chance of blowing up because they know more than us. They know, like,
of course,
which guy has a good chance of, okay, this guy's really going to be good. Like, they know pretty much right away.
Of course. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And yeah, I never thought of it like that, because usually I would think if you were doing that, you would say a source within the Giants told me that X guy's playing really well, but
But you don't want to burn those sources, especially for something so
yeah.
What's the benefit of that? So a lot of times I'll just say it in my own voice, because what good does it do me, right, to say source on something like that, something that you can basically point back to a specific coach or a specific general manager. People can then know exactly who it came from. It becomes too obvious to me. That's not worth ruining the relationship. I always, when I have information, that's what you have to juggle a lot as a beat writer. How important is it to potentially ruin that relationship, to put the word source on it? To me, I'll say a lot of things a lot. I'll use source, I think, less than a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's worth it for something that I'm just tweeting out that's not even in a story and not even written, for me to source it and then potentially, ruin a relationship that's important to me.
Yeah. Okay. Let's quickly go through some Giants questions here. People had Giants questions. I have Giants questions. Obviously, the big question is Saquon Barkley. You wrote a big story last week coming off the ACL and the meniscus in his right knee. Give us the overview of where you think Saquon is at now and what you think about his usage this season.
I think he's doing well in his rehab. There's nothing right now that has happened that would say he's had a setback, he's not going to be fine, he's not going to be okay. But I talked to enough people where it was relayed to me, hey, we have an investment long-term in this guy. We want to invest long-term in this guy. They don't really have it yet. But the idea is this guy's going to be part of our organization for a long time, right? Why would we rush to have him on the field? He played 87% of the snaps week 1 last year. Okay. What good does it do them coming off a serious knee injury in his first game back to come back and potentially play 87% of the snaps in week 1 of what is now a 17-game season? Like, how is that smart for the organization to bring him back to that degree? Because they're not going to bring him out there and put him in full pads and have him banging with people in training camp. That doesn't make sense either, right? You're going to be taking it very carefully with him in training camp. How much contact is he even going to face in training camp? How many times is Saquon Barkley going to take a hit in training camp? The answer, who knows, could be 0, right? I mean, I don't think it's out of the question. Like, you're not going to have a running back coming off a serious knee injury taking hits in training camp ever, really.
Sure.
So you're going to bring him back really slowly. And, whether that means 50% of the snaps the first few weeks, 30% week 1, 40%, you have to understand that the first probably quarter of the season, which I guess there is no quarter, it's 17 games anymore, which is just messes up everything, right? The 9-8. They're going to be 9-8 this year. They're going to be 10-7. It doesn't even sound right at this point. Yeah. But it's just like they're going to bring him along slowly. Whether it means first 4 weeks of the season, you're not going to see Saquon Barkley completely unleashed. Whether it means he might not play till week 3, who knows? Like these are all, I think, somewhat realistic possibilities. If you look on the spectrum of possibilities, I think they're all on there somewhere. Now, is it likely he plays week 1? Yeah, sure. I think it probably is. But is it likely he's going to play 75, 80% of the snaps? Definitely not.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, you don't have to comment on this. My argument would be that based on running back career arc, they don't have a long-term investment in him. Like they should be counting at him donezo in like 3 or 4 years. And so they should use him as much as they can now and not pay him. But anyways, that's a whole other story.
There's a marketability part of this. Sure. He's the face of the franchise. Like you go into a store, what jersey you seeing?
Yeah.
So maybe if Daniel Jones blows up and has a big, huge year and can become that guy that's marketable,
right?
Then he's that guy. So it makes it a more difficult, more nuanced decision for sure.
For sure, yeah. And obviously, we're going to take some of what Jordan says and account for it in projections and rankings. And when you're splitting hairs on these first-round guys, if we think there's any chance he'll be limited in the first month, he might slide back a few places. We'll talk about more about that with Evan later.
Every running back comes with risk, though. Is that not true? I mean, that's the look who was drafted the running backs last year. They were the first 3 guys were all dust, basically.
Of course, but we don't have to spend a top 3 or 4 pick on a guy who's already coming in limited. You know what I mean? We don't have to. We could.
Who doesn't come with question marks at this point, though?
Yeah. Well,
Christian McCaffrey was injured all last year also.
Yeah.
Dalvin Cook's had injuries in his career.
You just got to wait and get Eckler and Mixon to start and you're golden. Okay. Anyways.
You got to send me the under the table list that you do every year. That's what I wait for.
Let's talk about this Kadarius Toney pick. I don't really want to debate the pick itself. A lot of the analytics guys hated it. I don't want to get into that. I think just from a usage perspective, how do you think Kadarius Toney will be used in year 1? Do you have any idea yet? And what wide receiver do you think he would take the most from? Not only have they added Kadarius Toney, they also added Kyle Rudolph. So we could include Evan Ingram in there. Who do you think loses the most out of Shepard, Slayton, Galladay, Ingram?
I think it's Ingram. Ingram was they tried to force him into the number 1 role last year. I mean, his usage was high. I mean, they tried to force feed him the ball as the number 1 target last year. Now there's a pretty deep tight end room with 4 guys who have real NFL experience in the same room. Now, I think Evan Ingram could be more efficient. He pretty much can't be less efficient than he was last year. I mean, between the drops and he just kind of wilted. But he's the guy who's probably going to get affected the most. I mean, there's so many other targets this year. Just think, this offense, and this is why I think the Giants are going to make a significant jump this year. They went from having pretty much nobody. Shepard was injured at times, so they had Shepard, Slayton, and Ingram. Now they're re-adding Saquon to the mix. They're adding Kenny Galladay. So those are 2 really premium players that you're adding to an offense. You add those 2 guys alone, that's a lot of offense you're adding. Then you're adding Toney, who's a first-round pick. Then you're adding Rudolph, who I know and I'm like you, I'm probably an ageist in sports, 100%. I don't like old guys. He's still a red zone threat, which in fantasy just will drive you nuts. I mean, because he'll pilfer touchdowns from guys. That's his best skill at this point, at least from a receiving perspective. He's good in the end zone. He doesn't need a lot of room to make catches. So you add all these guys to an offense, they're going to make a jump. Yeah. The question is, how do those snaps then get dispersed? And that's why I don't know. I don't see Kadarius Toney being a guy who's going to have a huge target share, a guy who's going to play 70% of the snaps. I just don't see where those snaps come from. The only way I think he's a really useful fantasy player, a DFS guy, is if Sterling Shepard gets injured. Then he steps into the slot role, play like 70, 80%, and he could be a really good player. In the meantime, he's a guy they're going to use as like an offensive weapon, especially year one as a rookie. He's a guy who's still learning the receiver position on top of that. So he's kind of like a gadget guy who can be used in special teams as well, who they might use in the backfield, who might play wildcat quarterback at times, play in the slot, play outside. But how can you trust that for fantasy? That's like your worst nightmare for fantasy. He may be a stud and average 15 yards a touch. But the worst thing for fantasy and DFS is when you don't have target share or don't have a high snap percentage. Like, I'd rather a guy be less effective and play 90% of the snaps.
Sure. No, I mean, the issue isn't going to be, is he an option? It's how much is he going to take away from actual options like Galladay or Shepard.
Well, he's not taking away from Galladay. Galladay is, that's the thing about Galladay. He fit a spot for the Giants that was just vacant. They did not have a big outside contested catch number one receiver who can go up and catch the ball, who when Daniel Jones is in trouble, he could just throw the ball up to, and Kenny Galladay could come down with the catch.
Yeah.
Now, Sterling Shepard is kind of the underneath blanket. I still kind of like him when he's healthy and if he in that role, back in the slot where he's probably best. Like, I like Sterling Shepard in that role. I still see him producing similarly than he has in the past. But it's Galladay. I mean, it's Ingram whose stats completely get, pulled back. Saquon, probably even a healthy Saquon as a receiver. Remember, those stats 2 years ago when he loaded up on catches, and I know you're well aware of this, Eli check down central, like those numbers are never going to happen again for Saquon as a receiver.
Yeah.
And what he did his rookie year as a receiver, he just won't get those opportunities. Now, he may be more efficient, maybe be able to make more big plays. The Giants screen game last year, even with Saquon in the first few weeks, they had 25 play action screen passes last year. Okay. 15. They went for 25 yards.
Yeah.
Think about that. That's like hard to do. That's how inefficient it is. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
So they'll be more efficient, but the number of opportunities for him out of the backfield isn't going to be some big number.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't have to say it. I'll say it. I think Jason Garrett is kind of a total dunce. And so, there's a lot of problems there also with the scheme. Last Giants.
What do you think of Freddie Kitchens? He's going to have a bigger role in the offense. He's already doing more with the offensive line. He's going to be involved more there. The other coaches are also, they're going to have a bigger role in there.
That's
it's
exciting.
Not just Jason Garrett. So it gives you a little more optimism, I think, right?
Exactly. I like to hear that. All right, last question here before we get to a couple of listener questions about the quarterback from Ryan Seal. He says, please share thoughts about the Giants passing on Justin Fields at 11th overall. And from CHN Sports Guy, why aren't the Giants trying to land Aaron Rodgers? Daniel Jones is a piece of shit playing quarterback. I didn't say that. That was CHN Sports Guy. Why aren't the Giants trying to upgrade a quarterback? It seems like they're going to give Daniel Jones at least one more year to try to prove something.
Yeah, I mean, the Giants already made this investment. They see enough behind the scenes. Like, look, granted, he was bad last year. Awful. I don't think there's no way around it. He played poorly, but he also had dust around him, right? I mean, so in order to give him a fair shake, there was enough optimism. Think about it. If we turn the clock back 12 months, there was optimism on Daniel Jones because he showed a lot his rookie year that made you optimistic that he could be that quarterback. Now, the Giants see enough behind the scenes in regards to his work ethic, the way he operates. He can make it pretty much every throw. There's a lot to like there. So the idea is, okay, and look, you saw that this offseason. The number one goal was to get him playmakers, to put enough players around him to say, we're going to see one way or another whether he's legit or we need to move on from him. So now look at the position they put themselves in. They gave him all these weapons. Even if the line sucks, let's say the offensive line stinks, right? There's too many weapons for this offense to finish 31st in the league in points and yards and every stat you could imagine. The only reason they weren't 32nd is because Adam Gase was the coach of the Jets, right? So now he has everything. You have an opportunity to fully evaluate him with a good team around him. It's the same concept as Josh Allen. Now, is it realistic to say he's going to make the same jump as Josh Allen did in year 3? Where he became an MVP candidate? I think that's probably unrealistic. But if he makes a jump to middle of the road quarterback, quality quarterback, which I think is really reasonable. I don't think it's completely unreasonable. After his rookie year, you would have said it was reasonable.
Oh, yeah.
Last year, everything just went wrong for them. It was a terrible year. So let's see what he could do with weapons. That's how the Giants feel. And now they're in a position where they have 2 first-round picks already this year, right? Next year, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And they could say, if Daniel Jones doesn't work out, then we're in a good position next year to potentially take those picks and turn them into something, good and get another quarterback next year if that's where they have to go.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense. To me, it makes sense. Giving up on Daniel Jones now is probably a little too early because last year was such a mess. And some of it was not his fault in regards to Saquon got injured and they were just, without Saquon, they just did not have enough weapons or an offensive line that was good enough to support him around him.
Yep. Okay. Let's get to a few listener questions here before we get out of here. First one comes from Mo, and you can no comment this one if you want, but Mo says, has Jordan recovered physically and emotionally from the Eric Flowers truck stick?
Yeah, there was no physical recovery from that. It was put the hand on the shirt. And I was like, I don't know if you could tell here, but I'm about like 2 feet from the wall. That's kind of what it was. It was like a brick wall back there. It was kind of like a walk back, like that. And then I'm sitting like this. And I think I played you the tape once. There was tape of the audio, and it's like, yo, bro, hey, whoa, hey, whoa. So, my goal at the time, Deadspin was huge. I just started ESPN that year. My goal was to not do anything stupid to get myself on Deadspin. I think this was like game 4 of me covering the Giants for ESPN, and it was like on the front of Deadspin.
For those guys who don't know Eric Flowers, I mean, he's got to be like 6'9", like 330 or something like that.
He's a huge guy. He's not 6'9", but he's just wide. He's built big and huge. Yeah. A real introvert. It was totally out of nowhere. I mean, I hadn't spoken to him in like a year, and like he was mad apparently about something that happened like a year before. Like it was completely out of nowhere. Granted, it was a rough game for him. Clay Matthews had like 17 sacks.
Yeah, one of many rough games for Eric Flowers in his career. From Chris, he says, how much should I wager on Joe Judge Coach of the Year to go along with my division plus 450? So I also have some Giants plus 450 to win the division. I think the division is really close, way closer than plus 450. Now I think that line has come back a little bit. But yeah, if they do win the division, Joe Judge certainly has a good chance to win Coach of the Year. I kind of like betting them both. I don't know. I know you probably can't comment on this too much, but I do think the Giants have improved enough to at least put this in play.
Yeah, I've been commented plenty on it. I thought the Giants plus 400, 450, whatever it was at the time. I mean, those are high odds for the Giants who weren't far off from winning the division last year. We just talked about they're definitely better than they were last year. So I always thought their odds, when I saw that for the first time, I even texted you. I was like, man, these seem really off to me. Like that's pretty high. So yeah, why not Joe Judge? I mean, I don't know if their ceiling is like, I got to think of these stupid numbers. 12-5. Like, they can't say 12-4 anymore. 12-5 or 13-4, which, some team is going to come and blow up and go 13-4. I don't know if that's in the realistic range of possibilities for the Giants. So it would probably be, I'd probably think more along a team that can do that. Yeah. With their coach than Joe Judge. But, hey, if they have a chance to win a division, there's some value in it for sure. For sure. By the way, you keep bitching about this, a 17-game season. It's not about the records. It's about you having to work an extra week for the year. Don't try to fool the people. I always used to joke with Mike Reese because he covers the Patriots, and Jeff Howe, who also covers the Patriots for The Athletic. I used to always joke with both of them, like their job, I can tell them working till like mid-February every year because they were in the Super Bowl every year. Right. I was done by New Year's. Okay. Last question we're going to do today. I actually didn't write the name here, but I promise it was actually a question submitted. It said, how thirsty does Saquon's thighs make you and other beat writers? I don't know if you've noticed this, Jordan, but this offseason, beat writers are taking and talking about players' thighs at just an outrageous rate. I mean, they're writing about players' definition in their thighs. They're taking pictures of them. They're tweeting them out. Well, what's going on in the beat writer scene with players' thighs this spring? Yeah, this is like what we talked about before. You give the people what they want. And I know if I take a picture of Saquon's thighs, everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, look at his thighs!" Woo. So yeah, people see it. It's happened now for years. Daniel Jones, I had pictures of him working out last year. People are like, look at his legs, woohoo! So yeah, I mean, yeah, we're thirsty. We're thirsty for thighs, man.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
I mean, there you go. We got a slogan. We should patent that. Thirsty for thighs.
Yeah, well, there's already all these people on Twitter and in the comments calling me thirsty for thighs. So yeah, I'm just aggregating the information. I'm not out there.
Oh, because you're
it.
high on AJ Dillon?
Nah, I just I had some thigh tweets. No big deal. Okay. We've said it all. Jordan, tell the people where they can find you on Twitter. Jordan's going to be our source for everything Saquon, and obviously he understands the fantasy game. Be sure you're following him. Jordan, tell the people where they can follow you on all the platforms.
At Jordan Raanan on Twitter. It's JORDANRAANAN. Nobody can get that right. And Jordan Raanan on ESPN. I'm on Instagram. I'm on pretty much every social platform. I'm learning a lot of new things. Clubhouse, TikTok. If you're not open to learning and change, this, you're going to fall behind, man.
I know.
You can't just be the old guy yelling at the cloud. This stupid social platform is dumb. Yeah, you fall behind.
Just because you don't understand the future doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. I mean, that's just so obvious. Okay.
I'm mad that Silva's not here because I wanted to put him on the spot, because ETR's favorite beat writer, he when he talks to me, he gives me, "Oh, you're my favorite beat writer." But we all know if he had to save me or Nick Underhill, if we were both there, we're drowning in the water, and Evan had to save one of the two of us, who do we think he would save? Huh?
Nick Underhill.
Nick Underhill. It's Nick Underhill. I have no doubt that I'd be dead.
It's a great point. We should have Evan on to answer that. I will ask him that next time, and we can clip that against Evan's answer.
So producer Luke can title me ETR's second favorite beat writer, beat reporter.
That's good. Okay, we've said it all. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I enjoyed it. For producer Luke, for Jordan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.